The tragic shooting of Eleanor Vance, a story of injustice and accountability. The evening was quiet in the upscale Willow Creek Estates, the kind of stillness that wraps a neighborhood in calm. Eleanor Vance, a kind-hearted woman with a love for her garden, was tending to her crimson rose bushes. Her hands moved gently, pruning with care, when a harsh voice shattered the peace. "Hey, old woman, hold still. What the hell are you doing here at this hour?" The voice belonged to Officer Michael Donovan, his tone abrupt, rude, and thick with suspicion. Eleanor looked up, her kind eyes narrowing as she saw the policeman approaching, his demeanor anything but friendly. She was a little surprised, but she kept her composure. "Good evening, officer. What's the matter?" "I'm just tending to these roses," she replied politely, though confusion crept into her voice. "Tending to roses?" Donovan sneered, his contempt unmistakable. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes scanning Eleanor from head to toe, lingering meaningfully on her dark skin and plain clothes. "You don't look like someone who lives in this upscale neighborhood, do you? You must be a maid who sneaks out while her boss is away to do something shady, right?" The racial slur in his words was unabashed. Eleanor frowned deeply, offended. She had lived here with her son for several months, and while she might not have dressed in the silks of the other ladies in the neighborhood, she did not deserve to be treated like this. "Officer, I am not a maid. This is my son Marcus Vance's house, and I live with him. I have a right to be here," she said firmly. "Your son Marcus Vance?" Donovan repeated the name, his voice dripping with suspicion. "Here in Willow Creek Estates. Don't make this up." He stepped closer, his tone growing more arrogant. "Where's your identification? Show me. Let's see if you're really someone's mother or just a phony vagrant." "I was in my own yard, and I didn't have my wallet or identification with me," Eleanor replied, her voice hardening slightly at the unfair treatment. "And I have no obligation to show you my papers when I've done nothing wrong. Tell me, what legitimate reason do you have for stopping me and asking me such unreasonable questions?" Eleanor's calm, clear-headed response and her questioning of his authority added fuel to Donovan's simmering anger. He was a prejudiced man, insecure and threatened by people of color, especially when they appeared intelligent or stood up for their rights. To him, his police authority was being challenged by an elderly black woman. "Because I doubt you," Donovan shouted, his face red, his right hand already gripping the butt of his gun. "You're being defiant. You're hiding something." He saw Eleanor instinctively take a step back as he approached, her hand perhaps raised slightly to shield herself. To Donovan, in his state of tension and blind prejudice, the action was interpreted as a threat. "Freeze! Drop your weapon!" He roared irrationally, though it was clear Eleanor held no weapon, only a small pair of pruning shears. Eleanor froze, completely confused by the officer's unreasonable order and aggressive attitude. She opened her mouth to explain, to say she was unarmed, but she no longer had the chance. In a moment of madness, driven by unfounded fear, racial prejudice, and uncontrolled anger, Officer Michael Donovan pulled his Glock pistol from its holster. Bang! A single gunshot rang out, sharp and dry, tearing apart the quiet of Willow Creek Estates. The bullet struck Eleanor Vance in the chest. Her eyes widened in horror and disbelief. She staggered back a few steps, then collapsed onto the lush green lawn, right next to the crimson rose bushes she had so carefully tended. Blood began to ooze from the wound, staining her purple sweater. Donovan stood there, stunned for a moment, staring at the elderly woman's lifeless body and the smoking gun in his hand. What had he done? Panic surged through him. He looked around, noticing a few windows of nearby houses open, a few figures peeking out. Screams began to pierce the air. "Oh my God! Gunshots! Someone's been shot! Call 911 now!" Donovan was startled. He had to do something. He quickly holstered his gun, pulled out his walkie-talkie, and stammered a report to the dispatch center. "Center, this is car 54. There, there was a shooting at the address. Subject was acting threateningly. I was forced to shoot in self-defense. Request an ambulance and immediate support. He began to weave a story to cover up his terrible act, but the truth cannot be hidden forever. The fatal gunshot not only took the life of a gentle, innocent mother but was about to ignite a legal and political earthquake that would shake the entire city. Because the victim was not just an ordinary elderly black woman, she was Eleanor Vance, the mother of federal prosecutor Marcus Vance. The wail of police and ambulance sirens shattered the quiet of Willow Creek Estates. Within minutes, the small street in front of Marcus Vance's house was blocked off by yellow tape and a heavy Maplewood police presence. Red and blue lights flashed in the twilight, casting a chaotic and mournful glow. Paramedics rushed from the ambulance to where Eleanor Vance lay motionless on the grass. After a few minutes of quick examination, they shook their heads sadly. She had died at the scene from a gunshot wound to the chest, causing severe damage to her heart and lungs. Her body was temporarily covered with a white sheet, awaiting the arrival of the forensic team. The crime scene was heavily guarded by police officers. Detective David Miller, a veteran of the Maplewood Police Department's Major Crime Unit, was assigned to the initial investigation. He conducted his work methodically, ordering photographs of the crime scene from multiple angles, marking the location of shell casings found near where Donovan stood, seizing Donovan's murder weapon for ballistics testing, and taking preliminary statements from witnesses. Officer Michael Donovan, the shooter, was immediately removed from the scene and placed in isolation in another patrol car, as is standard procedure for officer-involved shootings. When Detective Miller arrived to take his initial statement, Donovan appeared distraught but clung to his story of self-defense. I was on patrol and saw her acting suspiciously in the yard," Donovan stammered, his voice shaking. "I went up to her and asked for her papers, and she was hostile and reached into her pocket as if to get a weapon. I saw something shiny. I felt like my life was in danger, and I had to shoot in self-defense, Detective. I had no choice." He tried to make the story sound favorable, but the panic and inconsistencies in his testimony were not lost on Detective Miller's expert eyes. Meanwhile, other officers interviewed neighbors who had witnessed the incident or heard the gunshots. Their accounts were almost unanimous. They heard the officer yelling loudly before the shots rang out. Some saw Eleanor simply gardening, not appearing dangerous or threatening in any way. One neighbor insisted she was holding only small pruning shears, which could not have been mistaken for a weapon. These accounts clearly contradicted Donovan's story of self-defense. Most importantly, the data from Donovan's body cam was immediately seized and sealed. Detective Miller knew this video would be the most important and objective evidence to clarify the truth. He asked the technical department to prioritize processing and analyzing this data. The next step was to identify the victim and notify her next of kin. Detectives were sent inside the large house to search for the elderly woman's identification. In the guest bedroom on the first floor, they found Eleanor's wallet, which contained an old driver's license, a social security card, and several family photos. The name on the papers identified her as Eleanor Vance, age 72. In her phone book or notebook, they found her son's emergency contact information, Marcus Vance, along with his address and phone number. One detail caught the detective's attention: the office address listed next to Marcus Vance's name, United States Attorney's Office. Detective Miller frowned at this information. A federal prosecutor? Was there a coincidence here? He decided to make the difficult call himself. He dialed the office number listed in the notebook. After a few rings, a deep, professional, and confident male voice answered. U.S. Attorney's Office, Vance speaking. How may I help you? Detective Miller's heart skipped a beat. Vance? U.S. Attorney Vance. He glanced back at the victim's name on the paperwork, Eleanor Vance. Same last name. Impossible. He tried to keep his composure and cleared his throat. Excuse me for disturbing you. Am I speaking to Federal Attorney Marcus Vance? He asked cautiously. Yes, this is Marcus Vance. What's up, Detective? Marcus Vance's voice remained professional, but there was a hint of surprise and doubt when he heard the person identify himself as a detective. Detective Miller took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. This was probably the most difficult call of his entire investigative career. "Sir, Attorney Vance, this is Detective David Miller, Maplewood Police Department. I regret to have to bring you some very sad news." He paused, trying to find the right words. "There was a shooting just moments ago at your residence in Willow Creek Estates." "Shooting at my house?" Marcus Vance's voice was tense and urgent. "Is anyone hurt? Is my mother home?" Detective Miller felt his throat dry. "Sir, the victim of the shooting was an elderly woman named Eleanor Vance," he hesitated. "She did not survive, sir." "I am so sorry." There was complete silence on the other end of the line, a silence that lasted a few seconds but felt like an eternity, more terrifying than any scream or cry. Detective Miller could hear heavy, rapid breathing. Then Marcus Vance spoke, his voice laced with pain and shock, barely a whisper but still managing incredible control. "My mother, Eleanor Vance, is my real mother," he repeated, as if to confirm the terrible truth that had just crashed down on him. What the hell happened, Detective? Who did this?" Detective Miller felt a chill run down his spine. He knew this was no longer a typical police shooting, it had become a high-profile case involving a relative of one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the area. "Sir, this is an ongoing investigation. It involves one of our officers, Officer Michael Donovan." Before he could finish, Marcus Vance interrupted, his voice now icy, laced with pent-up rage. "Donovan. Michael Donovan. I'll be there in a moment." The call ended abruptly. News that the shooting victim was the mother of U.S. Attorney Marcus Vance spread like wildfire through the Maplewood Police Department. Chief Davis, upon receiving Detective Miller's report, paled. He knew his department was on the brink of an unprecedented crisis. The pressure from the Justice Department, the FBI, the media, and the public's outrage would be overwhelming and potentially devastating. Officer Michael Donovan, the perpetrator, was in custody at the department and immediately placed under special surveillance. When he learned the true identity of the victim, his initial arrogance and defenses evaporated, replaced by extreme fear and a belated realization of the terrible consequences of his racial bigotry and abuse of power. He knew this time he would not get away with it. Immediately after receiving news of the tragic shooting involving U.S. Attorney Marcus Vance's mother, the federal investigative machinery sprang into motion at breakneck speed. The U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., directed the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, to officially take over the case from the Maplewood Police Department. The reason was obvious: the victim was an immediate relative of a high-ranking federal justice official, and the case had clear signs of a federal civil rights violation. An elite team of investigators from the FBI's Civil Rights Unit, led by Special Agent in Charge Sarah Jenkins, a woman known for her sharpness, experience, and uncompromising stance on police abuse, was dispatched to Maplewood that night. They took over the entire crime scene, initial records, and physical evidence from the local police department. While there was some coordination, it was clear the FBI was the lead agency and had the final say in the investigation. The FBI's first and most important task was to analyze the data from Officer Michael Donovan's body camera, considered the objective and central piece of evidence capable of revealing the entire truth behind the fatal shot. Video and audio analysts at the FBI's Quantico lab worked tirelessly to restore and decode every detail. What the video captured was truly shocking and outrageous, completely refuting Donovan's initial self-defense testimony. Unnecessary approach. The video shows Donovan deliberately stopping his car and approaching Eleanor Vance as she peacefully gardened in her yard, without any signs of suspicion or danger. Arrogant and insulting. The audio clearly captures Donovan's arrogant and disrespectful tone from the start, with nosy questions. "What are you doing here? Where are your papers?" And racial and social slurs, "Not from around here. Made. Shady." All were captured. The victim's calm and reasonable resistance. In contrast, the video shows Eleanor Vance remained calm and polite despite being clearly offended. She answered questions clearly, explained she was at her son's house, and demanded to know the reason for her detention in a completely legal manner. There was no provocative or defiant action or word on her part. Donovan's unreasonable escalation. When confronted by Eleanor and asked for a legitimate reason, the video shows Donovan becoming angry and losing control, shouting and making unreasonable demands. The unprovoked shooting. The most critical moment is when Donovan yells, "Drop your weapon," while Eleanor is clearly unarmed, her hand either in her sweater pocket or raised in a defensive reflex. Almost immediately after, Donovan pulls out his gun and shoots her in the chest from close range, without hesitation or any indication he actually felt his life was in danger. The action happened so quickly, so decisively, showing a complete loss of control and possibly premeditated intent to use force. The body cam video became irrefutable, ironclad evidence, exposing all the lies in Donovan's initial testimony and revealing the true face of his abuse of power, racial prejudice, and irresponsible, brutal shooting. In addition, the FBI re-interviewed all neighborhood witnesses, whose testimony further reinforced the body cam footage. They confirmed Eleanor was a gentle person, never quarreled with anyone, and was peacefully gardening at the time. They also clearly heard Donovan yelling before the gunshots rang out. A detailed autopsy by the federal medical examiner confirmed Eleanor died from a single gunshot wound to the chest at close range, causing severe damage to her vital organs. No weapon was found on her body. A pair of small pruning shears lay nearby on the ground, clearly not mistakable for a deadly weapon. The FBI also dug deeper into Michael Donovan's background and work history. They discovered that, although he had never been severely disciplined, Donovan had received numerous complaints from the public, mostly people of color or other minorities, about his rudeness, discriminatory behavior, and use of unnecessary force in low-level situations. These complaints were often dismissed or handled lightly within the Maplewood Police Department, indicating an alarming pattern of behavior and a failure of the previous oversight system. As the federal investigation continued with urgency and vigor, U.S. Attorney Marcus Vance, grieving the loss of his mother, tried to maintain his position. Due to a clear conflict of interest, he could not directly intervene in the investigation. All work related to the case was handled by his senior colleagues at the Department of Justice and the Office of Special Counsel. However, with his position and prestige, Marcus closely followed every step of the investigation. He had frequent confidential discussions with the Attorney General and FBI Special Agent in charge Jenkins, ensuring all necessary resources were mobilized, every aspect of the case was clarified, and justice was carried out in the strictest manner. He appeared in public only once, at a brief press conference a few days after the tragedy. With a sorrowful face but a firm voice, he read a short statement, expressing the immense pain of his family and praising his late mother as a kind, loving woman who always believed in justice. He expressed faith in the legal system he served, demanding a thorough, fair, and uncompromising investigation into the person who caused his mother's unjust death. He emphasized that this incident was not only a tragedy for his family but a painful reminder of senseless police violence and the specter of racism haunting American society. His emotional yet measured and professional statement stirred strong emotions, receiving widespread sympathy and support from the public. Meanwhile, Michael Donovan, faced with experienced FBI agents and undeniable evidence from his own body cam, completely collapsed. His initial defense shattered. He could no longer deny or fabricate. Under terrible pressure, he may have panicked, had a mental breakdown, or stubbornly blamed the circumstances or the victim's provocation, in vain. The truth about his brutal actions and dark motives had been fully exposed. The FBI investigation gathered enough evidence to build the strongest possible indictment, preparing for an upcoming historic trial. After a comprehensive FBI investigation concluded with irrefutable evidence of Michael Donovan's unjustified shooting, abuse of power, and racially motivated killing of Eleanor Vance, the U.S. Attorney's Office made a historic and shocking decision, to prosecute the former police officer on the most serious charges and pursue the maximum penalty under the law, the death penalty. This decision was not made lightly. It reflected the extreme gravity of the case, the public outrage, and perhaps the unique status of the victim as the mother of a federal prosecutor. The Justice Department wanted to send the strongest possible message: brutal and unlawful killings of citizens by law enforcement officers would never be tolerated and must be punished to the fullest extent to ensure justice. To ensure objectivity and avoid any potential conflicts of interest involving Marcus Vance, the Department of Justice appointed a special federal prosecutor, Ms. Amanda Holloway, to lead the prosecution team. Ms. Holloway was a veteran attorney known for her sharpness and extensive experience in complex civil rights and death penalty cases. She was given full authority to determine the prosecution strategy and present the case in court. The formal indictment against Michael Donovan, filed in U.S. District Court, included the most serious charges. 1. Deprivation of civil rights under law causing death, a core federal crime focusing on the intentional violation of Eleanor Vance's rights to life, security, and freedom from excessive force, committed by Donovan while on duty and resulting in her death. This crime, in extreme cases, can be prosecuted with the death penalty. 2. Use of a deadly weapon during the commission of a crime of violence, an additional federal charge often associated with violent crimes involving guns, which can result in additional prison sentences. 3. Second-degree murder under the criminal law of the state where the crime occurred, focused on the intentional killing of a person without premeditation, unlike first-degree murder. The combination of federal and state charges ensured the best possible conviction. Michael Donovan's trial in the federal courthouse became an event that attracted national and international attention. Domestic and foreign media sent reporters to cover the case. The courtrooms were always packed with attendees, including representatives of civil rights organizations, social activists, the victim's family, the defendant's family, and a large number of interested members of the public. Security at the courthouse was tightened to an unprecedented level. Marcus Vance, though not part of the prosecution team, was present in court as the victim's son. He sat quietly in the front row, his face hard with grief but his eyes steady as the proceedings unfolded. His presence, a powerful federal prosecutor watching the trial of his mother's killer, was a haunting image, a constant reminder of the tragedy and the urgent need for justice. The trial lasted for weeks, with the presentation of evidence and heated debates between the two sides. Led by Amanda Holloway, the prosecution team presented a powerful and compelling case. They began by playing Donovan's body cam video, the central, irrefutable piece of evidence. Holloway analyzed every second, every word, every action, exposing Donovan's senseless escalation, aggressive demeanor, disparaging remarks, and cold, unprovoked shooting. She called neighborhood witnesses to testify, confirming Eleanor's gentleness and harmlessness and what they saw and heard that fateful afternoon. Forensic experts presented the autopsy results, confirming the cause of death and refuting any possibility of self-defense on Donovan's part. Social psychologists and criminologists analyzed implicit racial bias and police stress syndrome but stressed these factors could not justify the act of shooting and killing. Ms. Holloway painted a heartbreaking picture of a beloved mother and grandmother unjustly murdered in her own backyard by the very person supposed to protect her. She highlighted the brutality and inhumanity of the crime, the betrayal of public trust, and asked the jury to deliver a fair verdict reflecting the seriousness of the crime. Michael Donovan's defense team faced a daunting task. They could not deny that Donovan shot and killed Eleanor. Their main strategy was to reduce the murder charge to manslaughter or dismiss the federal civil rights element that could result in the death penalty. They argued Donovan acted in a state of panic, misjudging the threat due to work pressure and the complex security situation of the area. They focused on Eleanor putting her hand in her pocket as an action that raised suspicion, though the video clearly showed it was a natural reflex. They put Donovan on the witness stand to show remorse. Donovan cried, talked about psychological pressure and vague fears, but his testimony crumbled under Holloway's sharp questioning and the solid body cam evidence. They also tried to find flaws in the initial police or FBI investigation to shake the case but failed. In closing arguments, Prosecutor Holloway concluded with an emotional but powerful plea for justice for Eleanor Vance, her family, and the need to send a message of zero tolerance for violence and racism in the police force. She asked the jury to have the courage to make a verdict based on facts and conscience, no matter how difficult. After days of attentive listening and hours, even days, of tense deliberation behind closed doors, the 12-member federal jury reached a unanimous decision. They returned to the courtroom with solemn faces. The air was thick, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Michael Donovan stood, his face pale, hands clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. Marcus Vance sat in the front row, eyes closed, waiting for the verdict on the man who took his beloved mother. The jury foreman stood, holding the verdict paper, his voice clear and solemn. On the charge of deprivation of civil rights under law causing death, we the jury find the defendant Michael Donovan guilty. On the charge of use of a deadly weapon in the commission of a crime of violence, we the jury find the defendant Michael Donovan guilty. On the charge of murder in the second degree, we the jury find the defendant Michael Donovan guilty. The verdict was in. Michael Donovan was found guilty of all the most serious charges. He staggered, almost collapsing if not for his lawyer. A chorus of sobs erupted from his family. Marcus Vance opened his eyes, a single tear rolling silently down his strong cheek. Justice was at hand. Following the guilty verdict, the Michael Donovan trial entered its most intense and unique phase, the sentencing phase, where the jury would decide the former police officer's punishment, life in prison without parole or the death penalty. This was a complex and emotional legal process, requiring careful consideration of aggravating and mitigating factors as defined by federal law. After many hours of careful deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous decision. They returned to the courtroom with solemn faces. The jury foreman rose and read their final recommendation. We the jury, having considered all the evidence and the aggravating and mitigating factors, unanimously recommend the sentence of death for the defendant Michael Donovan. The final verdict was delivered, the death penalty. The courtroom held its breath. Michael Donovan stood, his face ashen, legs shaking as if about to give way. He knew his fate was sealed. A few days later, in the final formal sentencing hearing, the presiding federal judge, after considering the jury's recommendation and federal laws, solemnly read the final verdict. He reiterated the particularly serious nature of the case, the brutality of the crime, the betrayal of public trust, and the need for a proportionate sentence to ensure justice and deterrence. Michael Donovan, the judge said, his voice echoing through the courtroom, for the crimes you have committed, for the flagrant violation of civil rights, and the taking of the life of an innocent citizen under the guise of law, the United States District Court, upon the recommendation of the jury, hereby sentences you to, he paused for one last beat, then declared loudly, death penalty. The death sentence was pronounced. Michael Donovan collapsed, completely devastated. His family sobbed in anguish. Marcus Vance sat in the front row, eyes closed, hot tears rolling down his cheeks. Justice had been served to the fullest extent, but the pain of losing his mother was irreparable. Donovan was handcuffed and led out of the courtroom in heavy silence by U.S. Marshals. He would begin the long and uncertain journey down death row to a maximum security federal prison, awaiting the day of his final sentence for his unforgivable crimes. The death penalty sentencing of Michael Donovan sparked a national debate, reflecting the complexity and sensitivity of capital punishment in modern America. But for the victim's family, the black community, and many others outraged by police violence and racism, it was a necessary and proportionate act of justice. It affirmed that no one, not even the police, should be above the law and take lives without cause. After the trial, Marcus Vance may have made a final statement to the media. He expressed deep sorrow for his family's loss but affirmed his faith in the legal system, hoping this harsh sentence would serve as a strong warning, contributing to substantive changes in law enforcement to prevent similar tragedies. He may spend the rest of his career and life tirelessly fighting for criminal justice reform, combating racism, and protecting civil rights for all. Michael Donovan's case became a case study in police academies and law schools across the country, a painful reminder of the terrible consequences of bias, abuse of power, and failure to control force. The Maplewood Police Department and many other law enforcement agencies faced intense pressure to reform, change their organizational culture, increase oversight, and rebuild community trust. The tragic shooting at Willow Creek will forever be an indelible scar on the city's history and a wake-up call for an entire nation. Thank you for taking the time to read this story. If you found it meaningful, please share it and stay tuned for more stories that matter, because tomorrow, we'll bring you another one.